Hello, good evening. I would like to understand your opinion regarding the success in 1948. You described the Haganah as a sort of three parts army, a militia, soul, sort of a skeleton of the British administration that essentially was who organized as a police force, and finally the participation of portion of its elements in the World War II. The Second World War. So, which of these three elements do you believe were most important in the success in the 1948?
I'd say everything. But I think it's a question I've lectured on quite a lot because it's not seriously dealt with by my colleagues and historians. The reasons for the success. The initial reason, which was given, which is mostly a rhetorical reason, is the sense of back to the wall. The Jewish community had no chances to survive anything but victory. I mean, otherwise, defeat was unthinkable. And this rationale prevailed for many years afterwards. So it was mostly a question of morale and the will to fight. And then the second reason which was given, which became very popular, and is true, I mean, in the same sense, the sense of the back to the wall was true, was that the Jewish community had an effective leadership whose authority was generally accepted by the whole community. Even if they disagreed with the leadership of Ben-Gurion, they accepted his authority. And many disagreed. But they said, well, he's the leader, he's in charge, and what he says goes. There's no comparable leadership in the Palestinian community. The Palestinian community is divided against itself, and local leaders follow very different policies from the central leadership of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. The Arab countries who invaded Palestine do so in order to serve their own interests. And the interests of Egypt, by means of the presence of the Egyptian army in Palestine, are very different from the Jordanian or the Syrian. So even there you don't have a unified front or a unified effort. And the advantage there of the Jewish army was the ability to operate on internal lines and concentrate effort in various fronts, move its troops from one place to another. Administration, the British administration allowed the creation of a Jewish communal administration, which looked after, because it saved money and it saved effort. So, for instance, the Jewish economy was not dependent, or not entirely dependent, on the the British imperial economy. Let me give you just one example. This goes to what I think I mentioned. The genius or the ideal of organizing the whole society and the capability there. And this is something I'm working on now, so I'm very keen to talk about it because towards the end when the Second World War ended, the British and American armies in the Middle East, because there was also an American component, decided that it wasn't going to transfer all its stock back to Britain or the US. For instance, trucks and staff cars. It did not need all these trucks and staff cars. The idea in the British government was to reduce the army back to pre-war levels. The army didn't need all those many trucks and those many vehicles. And the question was what to do with them. And it was decided that they would be sold at a discount to discharged soldiers. And this was a way of compensating in Palestine the Palestinian Jews who served in the British Army, because they were paid less, because they were colonial soldiers, were paid less than British soldiers. So a discount was allowed, and trucks and staff cars became available. Now, on one level, the Jewish community organized to provide various channels, credit and financial aid to soldiers discharged, to enable them or give them some sort of help in establishing new lives, in starting their new lives, and in taking into consideration the time they spent in the army. But then the Histadrut decided, through its cooperative wing, that it would apply to the British government that all vehicles the army wished to dispense with would be sold to them. There's a central office would purchase, with the financial backing of the Histadrut and the national leadership, would purchase all these vehicles and sell them to the discharged soldiers. This was very convenient for the British government because they didn't have to deal with one item at a time, but could sell bulk of 200 vehicles, that's how it started, to just one a customer whose credit was good, who would pay for it. Then the Histadrut decides who's going to be allowed to purchase these cars, and of course their priorities were cooperatives because they were associated with the trade union. What does all this mean? An economic effort, which has nothing to do with the 1948 war in terms of its rationale, its original, the reasons for doing it, meant, going back to what I mentioned before, the ability of the Israeli army to operate on short lines, internal lines. In other words, it had the vehicles to move troops from one side of the country to the other. To do that, you need the trucks. To supply them, you need the trucks. Suddenly there are trucks. Now this is a development that had nothing to do with preparation for war, but was very significant to the conduct of war. So you have here developments which are part of the history of the British rule in Palestine, of the efforts of the Jewish community to use any opportunity to develop its economy, of the Histadrut trying to organize everything under its own auspices, and it becomes a multiplier when it comes to military ability, military capability. So what I'm trying to say is that the answer, by necessity, is a complicated answer. Personally, I think that consequently it's also a more interesting answer. But that's because I'm working on it, and